Hello, I'm Jean-Michel Grosjeu and welcome to my video number 6 about the complete rule set of Space Empires and its 3 expansions, Close Encounters, Replicators and All Good Things. And today it's time finally to talk about what makes this game so unique, because yes, these days 4X games are very popular and Space Empires can seem a little lost among these bestsellers or high-ranked games on the BGG ladder. But let's first take away the Euros in disguise, then let's keep only civilization games settled in space, and what's left is the top of the top. But among these top, Space Empires still stands out for an exceptional feature that adds to the drama and unforgettable memories of this game. I'm talking about secrecy and fog of war. These rules that change everything in an already sophisticated game system. In Space Empires, secrecy stands on 2 legs: hidden units and hidden technologies. Let's start with hidden units. Since the beginning of this video series, we've already seen quite a few ships and buildings that can be purchased with the CP's construction points, so let's try to sort them out. On the one hand, there are buildings you can build freely on any colony, and this includes shipyards SY. Then there are ships that can be built only using shipyards. And within ships, there are 2 families, combat ships and non-combat ships. Non-combat ships have no combat values on their counters, no attack, no defense, no class, no hit points. And then there's one unit that stays aside, and that's the shipyard, because it's a building, it's attached to a planet and cannot move, but it can fight. It can defend its planet if it is attacked. It's more like an orbital station that can fire on enemy ships. So, the shipyard deserves its place among the combat unit family, and this creates a new way of dividing units. Units that don't fight on top, units that do fight on the bottom. And of course, you can see where I'm going with this. Secrecy and concealment are all about combat units, which happen to all have the same reverse side. When these units are face down, there's no way of discerning them. All fighting units, including shipyards, are always built face down. Let's take the home planets we all have at the beginning of the game. As shipyards and scouts are combat units, they are face down. And even the numerical counters that show the exact number of units are hidden under the tokens. At the beginning of the game, with everyone having the same units, it doesn't matter. But as soon as the first movement phase begins, the scouts may split up, and for example, it may no longer be clear whether there are 2 scouts at the top and 1 at the bottom, or vice versa. Of course, yellow player knows, and he can check at any time if he doesn't remember who is who. But his opponents know nothing. Note that in previous videos, when there was only 1 scout, I didn't show its numerical counter to make things simpler. But in a real game, you never do that. You put a numeral counter under the ship, even if it's only a 1, because your opponents cannot guess how many ships a token represents. And in the economic phase, it's even worse, because players start building new units. Okay, you might say, no, at the beginning of the game you can only build scouts, but a clever player who wants to save money, for example, build nothing at all, but splits his 4 starting shipyards into 2 stacks to make the enemy think he's built new units. And that's it. This is psychological warfare, your goal being that after a while your enemies no longer know anything. Now let me introduce a new unit that fully exploits this concept of psychological warfare. the Decoy. To put it simply, it's a kind of fake ship put together to look like a warship when in fact it's not even armed and cannot do anything, not even explore. Still, it costs 1 CP to build, and you can build it right from the start of the game with ship-size technology at level 1. As its hull size is 0, it doesn't count towards the shipyard capacity, and you can virtually build as many as you like, as long as you have CPs to spend. As you build it, of course, and like all your other units, you put it face down on the board with a hidden numerical counter showing how many you've built. And that's it. Then you move it on the board like any other unit, and your opponent has no way of knowing that it's a worthless decoy. In fact, all a decoy can do is move, it cannot explore. And when it does move, it does so with the same range as other units depending on the level of the move technology. And since it's a decoy, not a real warship, it takes advantage of the new movement capability as soon as the move technology is upgraded. It doesn't need to go back to a shipyard to benefit from the upgrade. Now it's up to you to decide whether to make it fly back to a shipyard nonetheless, because if your opponent suddenly sees one of your ships moving faster than before, he may guess that it's a decoy. Let's say it's red player's turn and a red fleet moves onto a yellow fleet's hexagon. Everyone is face down, no one knows who they are dealing with, and then both players must announce whether they have anything in their fleet other than decoys. If, for example, yellow player announces that no, he has only decoys, then he discards them. They are out of the game, and red player can go on with his movement, so decoys don't hinder their opponent's movement. And note also that red player is not required to say anything about his own units, neither their type nor their number. All he had to say was that he had something other than decoys. Now let's take the same example but a little different, because this time yellow player has both decoys and combat unit. The red fleet enters its hexagon and both players ask each other, "Do you have anything other than decoys?" Both players answer yes, so for the moment no one is eliminated. The red fleet is blocked and can no longer move. But red player can move his other units. Now that he knows there are more than just decoys in the yellow stack, he can bring in reinforcements. And when the combat phase comes, after red player's moves have been completed, combat begins with the revelation of all units. Decoys are immediately eliminated, so you see, the yellow decoy may have scared red player a little, but as soon as combat begins, the trick is out and decoys are no longer of any use. Finally, you have to know that you don't even need a shipyard to build a decoy. All you need is a colony, so for 1 CP, you can make your decoy look like a shipyard. And if your opponents aren't paying attention, you can spawn a fleet of decoys at their border just to scare them off. Now let's go back to the combat we saw earlier after we've got rid of the decoys. No special technology. Red player attacks with his 2 cruisers and destroys 2 yellow scouts. The remaining scout fires back at the red scout. He misses, then the red scout shoots back, it's a hit, and that's the end of the yellow fleet. The battle is over, and what's interesting to note is that red units remain on the board just as they are. They are not flipped face down, they remain face up. And so, as long as they remain like that, face up, red units can be inspected by all players, even blue and green players who had nothing to do with the combat. For example, even several turns later, when the red fleet has moved, green player can look at the stack, the units and the exact number of ships. On the other hand, if the red fleet arrives at a red colony, or even better, its home planet, at the beginning of any turn there, counters are flipped face down, and from then on, the other players can no longer inspect this stack, neither the type of units nor their number. And that's it. So units are built face down and combat reveals their identities and numbers. Then they have to go back home to regain their secrecy. And all this only applies to combat units, units whose backs feature the same generic silhouette. And note that a fleet on a hexagon can hold a mix of face-up and face-down units. Now, no need to say that since the new units are built face down, your opponents won't know what you're producing. Of course, players' production sheets are secret too. You'll have to keep them out of sight and use a small screen, for example, because everything you write on this sheet will remain secret until the end of the game. And even if, as we've just seen, from time to time you reveal your units on the board, you never reveal your production sheet. And that includes technological progress. When you buy technology, it's a secret, and the exact breakdown of which ship has which technology, in other words, your ship technology sheet, that's a secret too. And then the question is, when and under what conditions players must reveal their technological levels. The basic rule is simple: you must reveal your technologies the moment you use them. Here's a simple example. This is turn 2 and yellow player moves his unit 2 hexagons. We can therefore deduce that he has at least developed the move technology up to level 3 and that this ship is moving benefits from at least the move technology at level 3. And if yellow player is asked, he must confirm. He doesn't show his sheet, but he confirms. He doesn't reveal the ship either, of course, and in the same way, if I see that yellow player is colonizing a barren planet, I deduce that he has terraforming technology at level 1 and he must confirm this if I ask him. And that's it. All this is pretty obvious, but it's a little more nuanced in combat, because in combat, all the ships must reveal their visible technology. Visible means a technology that you can read on the ship technology sheet. This is the sheet where you write individual technologies ship by ship. And you reveal it even if the ship doesn't need that technology in this combat. For example, this group of 3 destroyers, represented by token number 1, is taking part in a battle. The player must reveal that he has level 2 tactics, level 4 move and level 1 scanner. We will see what this technology is in video number 8. In other words, what's important here is that you must give this information even if you are not using these technologies during this combat. In fact, what appears on this technology sheet is what the enemy can see simply by looking through his ship's windows. You see big engines and you deduce that the ship benefits from the move level 4 technology, even if this technology is useless during combat. And don't forget, this is very important, don't forget that all this takes place around the same table on the same game board with all the players around. So any information revealed to one player is also revealed to all the others. In our example, even blue and green players know about the characteristics of the yellow DD1 ship. Word of mouth works very well throughout the galaxy. And voila, now you know all about secrecy and fog of war in Space Empires. This video is shorter than the previous ones, but it is no less important. Secrecy and psychological warfare, you'll see, form the soul of this game, and what makes it so different from the other 4X games. So, of course, I know that perhaps you are thinking that this system is very easy to cheat, because even if it is theoretically possible to check all the written data on the player's sheets at the end of the game, in practice players won't do it. But hey, if your playing partners are cheaters, just avoid playing with them. Yes, Space Empires is a highly competitive game, but one that relies on fair play. A game where friends can kick and stab each other in a wonderful harmony. That being said, I'll see you in the next video where I will invite you to step out of your comfort zone and explore deep space, that dark and icy zone that hides the worst dangers of Space Empires.